Hope everybody had a successful and enjoyable St. Pat's Day yesterday. As you know, we moved the Tuesday night session to tonight in honor of St. Pat's Day, so we're glad you all are here, and hope you all are feeling well. Tonight, I think you're going to be really excited. I'm excited because we have a guest with us tonight, Shannon Cahalan from the Belgium Brewing Co. New Belgium. I'll let Shannon fill you in on all of it, but it is one of the largest craft brewers in the United States, and actually they've only been around for, they haven't been around 25 years, less than that. And they started out brewing beer in the bathtub, but Shannon will fill us in on it. So I'd like Shannon to start off, tell a little bit about himself, and a little bit about New Belgium. We have a lot of material to go over tonight. We'll try to hit as many of the key points as possible, and at the end of each slide, we only have 4 slides, we'll have a short Q&A for those of you who have questions. So without further ado, if you will, let me introduce Shannon to the group.
Hello, everyone. Thanks, Jeff, and thanks for having me on here. Excited to be here. And my name's Shannon Cahalan. I'm with New Belgium Brewing, and I've been with New Belgium for almost 13 years now. And before that, in my previous life, I was with Diageo, which is also Guinness import company. So in total, about 15 years in the business. And so when Jeff mentions that hopefully everyone's feeling okay after St. Patrick's Day, I feel everyone's pain or everyone's survival technique after a good Paddy's Day. But really, if you're not familiar with New Belgium, it's, as Jeff mentioned, we're one of the larger craft breweries in the United States. We're actually currently 3rd behind Boston Beer in Sierra Nevada, and we're only in 40 states. And so we have plans to go to all 50 by 2018, a pretty aggressive rollout schedule. And we have our main brewery is in Fort Collins, Colorado. And we were founded in 1991 by Kim Jordan and Geoff Westapher. And so really it's a bootstrap operation, like Jeff mentioned. We weren't necessarily brewing in bathtubs, but we were home brewing. And Geoff Westapher is an electrical engineer by trade, and he took a sabbatical through Western Europe and spent a lot of time in Belgium and fell in love with the art of brewing and fell in love with how the Belgians take a look at beer and how unorthodox they are compared to their German neighbors, and that was pretty exciting. And so we like to say that we're pretty much born on a bike, because he rode his mountain bike all through Belgium, and back in the day they called mountain bikes fat tires, and so that's the name of our flagship beer now, Fat Tire. But strangely enough, Jeff's first beer to brew somewhat commercially was Abbey, and he thought that was going to be our home run. So it's a Belgian double, traditional Belgian double, and so he thought that was going to be our home run, and he was just tinkering around with some other brewing yeast strains, and really loved DeConic and De Palma, which are classic Belgian session ales, and so that's where he came up with the recipe for Fat Tire. And that's the one that took off, and so it was the great beer with the quirky name and the crazy looking label, and so that was the brewing aspect. And then Kim Jordan, who they were married at the time, she was the marketing and distribution arm. So in Colorado, you're allowed to distribute self-distribute under a certain number of barrels, and so she was literally driving around in her station wagon with her kids, dropping beer off. So when we say literally, it was a bootstrap operation. It was. They maxed out their credit card, they bought more brewing equipment, and then moved bigger and better from there. And our original format was a 22-ounce, very large format beer, which is synonymous with craft now, very authentic. But that's how we got started. So we are, fast forward about 13 million cases later, we are just about to commission our second brewery in Asheville, North Carolina. That should be commissioned in September, and so hopefully we'll be brewing and shipping out of there sooner than later, and then that'll allow us to open up the remaining states to be all 50 by 2018. So hopefully that's a quick rundown for New Belgium, and we'll kick it off from there.
Okay, well, let's go to the business side of the class today, and let's talk about some of the things that New Belgium does and has done well. We'll start with the off-premise. And we just got through, Shannon, I probably mentioned this to you, the recent assignment on pricing the product and taking the product to market and the key components of it. And you and I both know, and they all know too, that part of the overall strategy of a successful brand or brewery is price positioning your product. So it would be helpful for everybody to understand the Belgian philosophy, whether it's already a core market where you have been, Colorado, Arizona, Texas, for a number of years, or perhaps maybe you could talk about going into a new market, because we also talk about that too, positioning your brand, what you go through, your price points and so forth on the pricing, and as you and I both love to talk about, distributed markets, how that works too.
Sure,
so,
sure.
You could top line that for us, so we'd appreciate it.
Yeah, as far as pricing our beers, just to put it in context how important the off-premise is for us, our traditional mix, and when I say mix, it's packaged to draft, which matches up fairly decently to the on-premise and off-premise. And so the importance of off-premise can't be understated, just for the sheer fact that over the past 3 years, it's driven over 80% of our incremental growth. And so basically what that is really telling us is that as off-premise chain retailers, as off-premise retailers, as consumers really start to become educated on the types of beers out there and the more offerings that are out there, they are gravitating toward the off-premise to make these decisions. And conventional wisdom in the beer business was that brands were built in the on-premise and then volume was driven through the off-premise. But with the way the retail landscape has changed with some very creative and progressive retailers, they want to create a really great craft experience within their stores. And so with that being said, there's been an uncoupling of that conventional wisdom of on-premise driving the brand building, whereas you can successfully build brands in the on and off premise. I think Boston Beer is a great example of having the ability to build brands in almost exclusively off premise, because they're outside of the on premise chain draft world. They're virtually non-existent, and so it's been a really fascinating paradigm shift within the industry to see that actually happening. And so the importance of the off premise is increasingly important. And our old mix package to draft was closer to 60% package, 40% draft, and now we've actually come to the point where we are over 70% package driven, and basically we're 72-28 as far as our draft, and those numbers will change as our rollout markets evolve more outside of draft into package. And so when we take a look at the criteria for how we want to benchmark our competitors is we really have to understand the markets that we're going into and the markets that we're in. And really, there are three main types. You have chain markets, off-premise chain markets, which are typically big grocery stores or what we consider total lines that you're able to make one call point and affect a lot of retail accounts. And then you have, on the other end of the spectrum, independent markets, where chain markets are not allowed. And Colorado is a great example of that, where you can't sell full-strength beer in chain grocery. And so it really limits the universe that you can sell in the off-premise. And so those are primarily just liquor stores. And then you have somewhere in between that we call those the hybrid markets, where you will have a strong chain presence as well as a fairly strong package or liquor store presence as well. And so when taking a look at how you're approaching pricing, we identify what we consider the benchmark competitors with regard to price leadership. And so Boston Beer is a great example of someone who has been historically very savvy with their price points. And so we like to take a look at them to see what type of thresholds are pricing thresholds high and low that are present in a marketplace. And you know, I can only speak from the vantage point of New Belgium, because we are to the size now where we behave like a larger brewery and people see us as a larger brewery and retailers expect certain things from us. And so with us, I like to call it the herd mentality in a positive way, though. The way price increases happen and the way pricing is activated, it really happens twice a year. We have it in the spring, we have it in the fall. And what we do is we go with the herd. If you don't have the critical mass or the influence to be price leaders, you have to go with the herd, and that means frontline as well as discount. And so, did I lose you? I lost my screen here. Okay, great. And so,
I'm here.
Okay, great. So as far as that herd mentality, it's frontline as well as discounting. And so, so the first thing we do is we take a look at benchmark competitors. And the second thing we do is we take a look at, we call it swim lane pricing. And that is primarily what are those thresholds? What's the north end of it that we feel is logical, that there's still a value proposition for the for our drinkers, and also conversely from a discounting standpoint, what is that floor that we can go, that if we go below that, we'll start to erode brand integrity, so that you train your drinkers to buy when only on discount or deep discount. And so the reality is, your drinkers shop tags, and unless you are a smoking hot brand, price is a big component of driving purchase at point of purchase, but then also driving the retailer decisions to put you on an ad, which in turn creates a display, which in turn creates an insane amount of lift for us, and then you rinse and repeat, and that's really how we take a look at pricing. And so we do employ some spot market elasticity and cross elasticity studies to see how we behave within our own price points, and then also how we interact with other brands. But really, we have this holds true every single year. We spend a heck of a lot of money with IRI and now Nielsen on these elasticity and cross elasticity studies, and it tells us exactly what we already knew anecdotally from the marketplace, that you stay in your swim lanes, you stay with the herd, and you're going to be safe. And so really that's how we take a look at pricing. And then in our new markets, it's a bit of a different story. We like to take price leadership in new markets because we have enough brand clout to make the high tide rise. And so what we like to say is, all ships rise in a high tide, and that means pricing. And so a lot of times folks are itching to take pricing, and that's a big benefit that we outline to our distributors, that when we are discussing rolling out the brands, that if they already have a pretty decent craft portfolio, that by adding us, they in turn have a lot of price leverage in the market. And so it's not only us coming in at a price leadership standpoint, they also have the ability to take other craft beers up in price, which is a tremendous revenue and profit generator for them. And so a lot of times we break the beaver dam on pricing. We'll come in and we're able to, as a group, take pricing north, and then everyone really shares in the revenues and profitability and margin impact. So hopefully that's a rough sketch on the off-premise pricing approach. And then in some years we do have to be a bit conservative. If we did get a little too big for our britches on overreaching our pricing, then we have the ability to discount, and that's where our promotional calendars come in. And a lot of times we'll come in, and if it's a certain type of market, particularly in chains or markets where you were able to discount, because there are actually markets that you're not allowed to discount, they're called post and hold. But if we are able to discount, we feel pretty good that if we are able to push the envelope on pricing north, and we're not out of our swim lane on the high end of the front line, then if we do step out of line, we're able to use discounting as a lever to kind of right-size the ship. And if in some instances we got way too out ahead of this, we thought our brands were going to really push the envelope with pricing, and some folks didn't come with us. And so when you're at $1 or $2 disadvantage on 12 packs or $1 on 6 packs, that's it's pretty simple math that you're going to take a beating if you're consistently out there. And so we have gone to the lengths of running what's called a false front line. And basically what that is you have a frontline price, and we discount every day from case one, so that if, for instance, you have an $18.99 12 pack, but you are so far out of your swim lane and you are breaking through all price thresholds and you have no competitors there with you, well, then you discount back to, say, a more reasonable level of either $17.99 or $16.99 to get you back into that swim lane, so that when you take a look at your elasticity and cross-elasticity studies, you're just you're not becoming too elastic, and you don't want to train your consumers to be put off by price points that are too high or that won't sell, because a lot of things depend upon those sales, not just revenue, but then also how many ads you get, and display supportive feature is a big driver for us, because when you take a look at the merchandising variables independently, from pricing to discount, frontline pricing, discounting, display, distribution. Once in distribution, once you're able to generate the proper swim lane pricing and you begin to get ad support, we see our lifts, in triple digits. And craft beer is extremely responsive to feature and display. And what I mean by feature is chain grocery, where they picture you in their circular, or you're on their display planner, and you basically get a mandate to have a display on the floor. And displays that makes our world go around as far as growth.
It makes everybody's world go round in the beer business. To say the least of it. So that's really good, Shannon. I appreciate that. When you talk about ad activity, touch on a little bit about how key it is for wholesaler execution during ad activity, and how you evaluate each of those ads.
Sure, and really our philosophical approach to the markets, particularly in the off-premise, is control the controllables. And I don't, if you've heard variations on that, but really it's focus on the drivers within your grasp that you can measure, and that you can measure, and that are reasonable to ask of your distributors, and that'll actually drive growth. And outside of distribution and speed to shelf, as we call it, closing, basically if you get an authorization and your speed to shelf is from the day you're authorized to the day that beer shows up on the shelf, we have targets of 21 days or less, which is a pretty quick turnaround. And so if it's not in distribution, it can't be sold. And so we want speed to shelf with authorizations or new brand launches. And then two, display execution. And particularly in chain grocery, like I mentioned before, we have triple digit lift when we are featured and displayed. And when you're displayed without featured, it's still a gaudy number at close to 80% lift for us. And that means you sell 80% more than you would when you weren't on display. And so really, what that all about is, it's a shopper stopper. It basically puts backstock on the floor. It allows beer shoppers and drinkers to kind of, if you physically have to walk around something, you're going to look at it and hopefully you'll get an impulse out of it, or at least plant the seed. And if your packaging is on target, and your pricing is on target, and you're out there in front of them, you're 3 steps ahead of everyone else who's still sitting on the shelf. And so with regard to how we measure display execution, to me, outside of speed to shelf, display execution is the #1 volume driver for us. And we actually take a pretty unique approach to it, in that we used to utilize a lot of syndicated data from IRI or Nielsen that would evaluate display supportive feature based upon their personnel. They would go out and physically survey these stores, and it's super secretive, but occasionally you'll see folks surveying, but they will survey, check it down. Yes, there was a display. It has to be priced. It has to be more than 4 cases to count as a display. and then that will count for you, and then they will track that as far as a weighted ACV weighted display execution, and really that's a fancy way of saying, are the displays in the right stores, because the right stores that sell more all commodities volume will have more weighting in this display recap. But what we found is it was a total disaster. It was inconsistent, and it was not a good way to evaluate display execution other than physically going out to every store. And we also rely on distributor display recaps, but sometimes those are not timely, and it's not the best information. And so not to say that they falsify information, but it's sometimes just not good information. And so what we moved to is a retail shipment driven benchmark, and how it works is we use VIP, and VIP is the information that comes out of distributors for account level retail sales, and that information is all scrubbed, double checked by the distributor, then they release it to VIP, and then we start putting it through our queries and our engines to begin to spit out account level weekly retail sales. And so the thought process is that if you have an ad and you have a display that in order to build that display, you'd have to ship in more than a par level of inventory. Meaning, if you ship 5 cases a week to a particular store and you put in a 5-case display, well, chances are you're going to have to bring in more than 5 cases to display. And so we take a look at it. If they average selling 5 cases a week to one store, and we have an ad pop, and then we see that store received 10 cases the week prior or the week of the ad, we count that as a display. And so what it does is it really takes a lot of the guesswork out of where a display is and where it's not, because if they're not selling more to that particular account, and they say they have a display, then we know something's off. And really the biggest benefit of it is that it ships in adequate inventory to prevent out of stocks, which is really key. But then also it's a great way to track whether, according to historical 52-week average sales, if they sell more than that for that particular week, chances are there's a display there, or at least there's inventory in backstock, and we pushed up, and we won't see the likelihood of an out of stock. And so for us, that's as far as I know, we're one of the more unique breweries that approach it this way. And it's been really effective, because there really is no one source of truth with regard to display execution unless you are everywhere in every account. But we try to triangulate our shipment data with distributor recap, as well as our rangers, our sales reps, what their eyes and ears out there as well. So I'm not sure if that made much sense.
Hey, Shannon, you brought up a really good point when you touched on the out of stock issue that we know is key, especially if you're really small. Yeah. Well, it hurts anybody, whether you're small or you're big. And if you could give them some kind of a overview of the importance of holding power, shelf space, and products, kind of hit on that when the resets, and whether it's a roundtable discussion or what have you. I think it's real key for them to understand how important it is for the distributor to be able to have available, which, as you know, the ADI, the MC guys usually do, a merchandising team, weekend pull-ups, and so forth, that will allow them to maintain some inventory on the shelf. If you have 3 SKUs on the shelf, and it's Friday night, and you sell all 3, and you don't have anybody to fill it up, you're done.
Sure.
Wait, can I interrupt for a second?
So,
do you guys want to take questions as they come in? Because Christian has a question right now.
Sure.
Sure.
Do you see it there, Shannon?
I do. Yep. Okay. I'm a slow reader.
It's fine.
Shannon, I've taught them that in the pricing spreadsheets I've given them, the templates, that to price their product backwards based on the strategy where they want a price point to hit. And given the fact that, let's say the retailer works off a 30% markup, and then to move it back based on the distributor's margins, and then all the way back to the cost of the product. That's where he's coming from.
Yeah, and that's actually an excellent question. We're actually encountering this now, as you know, everyone knows hops are the number one craft style, the number one growing craft style, and they're here to stay. Well, hops are really expensive, and what we have found is we line price our portfolio for the most part, meaning for all of our 6-pack SKUs that are part of our everyday lineup, we line price those so that we are able to keep a consistent frontline and discount look at retail, so that if there are ads or if there are opportunities that we can bring the whole portfolio, the brand families together, because a lot of times they wouldn't allow them to be together if they're not similarly priced. But with particularly our double IPAs, that is part of our portfolio, we're taking a beating on them. And double IPAs, but then also your SKU configuration. Say a lot of these mixed packs, mixed 12 packs, ours is called a Folly pack, but a lot of times the production capabilities on mixed packs is fairly limited, and it's extremely expensive because a lot of folks literally have to hand pack these mixed 12 packs, and every time you're stopping their line, that is the one thing that'll absolutely annihilate your efficiencies from a production standpoint, is line stoppages. But when we impacting a variety 12 pack, which our Folly pack, and then it becomes your number one SKU in a lot of markets, your margin structure takes an absolute beating, because we've tinkered with having it at a higher price point. Doesn't work. We're out of the herd. You know, we're in front of the herd. We've tinkered with not discounting it. Doesn't work. Then we're still too far out ahead of the herd. And so we just have to understand and look at our blended margin structures to really get a good grip of what our mix is how that's going to have an impact for us. And really that drives a lot of how we approach a lot of our pricing discussions with our distributors during price increase time frame. We make it very clear where our mix is headed, and our mix is headed into a lower margin, more costly portfolio. But that's the price of poker. But what we have to understand is that by communicating with our distributors that our mix is changing, because we want to satisfy consumer demand for exploration, discovery, and variety with these craft drinkers, that they also have to participate in some of this pain point along with us, because they have expectations that they have the understanding that it costs us the same to produce every SKU we have. But it creates some pretty interesting discussions that, frankly, they weren't used to having when you're looking at some pretty large mass breweries out there where their SKU mix didn't have that much of a margin impact. For us, it has a huge margin impact because it's brand driven. And so really what we've done now is we just eat that. I'm sorry?
No, and that has a more dramatic effect the smaller you are. It
has a huge effect, and it's interesting that we're at the point now where during we call it portfolio council, where we're deciding on what brands to create, and our brand strategy now is to keep Fat Tire stabilized, but then also have a marquee launch in the first quarter of every single year. I mean, that's just to keep up with the market demand for exploration and discovery. We've also noticed, brand life cycles are significantly shorter, and I am a firm believer that there are brand life cycles. Granted, these brand life cycles are primarily driven on relevancy. If you're able to drive relevancy, then your brand life cycle is significantly longer, or maybe, you know, you won't have a life cycle, but relevancy really drives these life cycles. And so what we found is that we'll have a great launch, number one craft launch in the industry, and then we find ourselves back at square one the next year trying to come up with another brand to launch to replace some of the eroding volume from, you know, when it's not new. You can only be new once, and that new car smell doesn't last forever. So it's part of our decision-making process now. We're like, okay, before we would come up with these crazy beers, we're like, let's launch that, let's do it. Now we take a look at raw materials, we take a look at what our cost of goods sold are. I mean, it's you know, you got to put your big boy pants on and really understand that, you know, these whimsical brewers want to create these amazing beers, which they do, but at the same time, you know, I am held responsible for maintaining margins and keeping the lights on at the brewery for my coworkers. And so we have some very robust discussions on styles and margin impact and you know, raw materials and costs.
Well, this has given everybody a really, I guess, I hope an eye-awakening view, if you will, on overall. It's just not, let's brew some beer, put a good price point out there, hopefully make some good margins, and it'll sell. So
yeah,
let's kind of move on a little bit to this last part, and let's talk a little bit about the on-premise. You've given everybody a good snapshot, if you will, of the off-premise. Now that you skewed so heavily more so to the off, and you know, you and I have had a number of discussions of the on-premise today, kind of give them a little bit of idea of the importance of the draft. You know, you're known for your passion or insistence on having the freshest possible keg beer in the market, which goes all the way through glass cleaning, line cleaning, and so forth. Talk a little bit about that, and then the merchandising piece of it in the on-premise, and kind of end up with what you see happening in the place from not only y'all, but from your competitors too.
Sure. Well, for as logical and straightforward as the off-premise can be, the on-premise is equally illogical. And when I mention control the controllables, there's no controlling. You can't even control the uncontrollables in the on-premise. And so I don't know if you can see this gray hair on my beard, but that is directly related to our trying to. Yeah, and you know, from my but it's the on-premise is it is still, and we are one of the higher mix craft breweries of any scale with regard to how much we sell in the on-premise. Like I mentioned, we're still close to 28% in the draft business, which is huge. And for us, we made an investment from day one that in order to have from a philosophical standpoint, that if you really want the best representation of your beer, you need to invest in non-revenue generating aspects of your business. And that's we have the largest QA department in the country, period. We invest more than any other brewery, period. And then that's directly tied to the number of folks we have in the market that their sole purpose in life is to protect quality assurance for New Belgium beers. And so what that entails is distributor education. It entails retailer surveys. It entails retailer surveys to determine if we are able to actually sell draft beer in that account. And what's so mind-boggling is that beer is food, this is food grade. We feel food grade regulation should be applied to beer because it is a foodstuff. However, it's not. It's regulated completely differently. And the thing is, it's not regulated. And so in the absence of some type of sanity, we've installed and made huge investments in our QA leadership and support. And we've been waving this banner for years because QA demise was the single biggest reason for the craft melees in the late 80s and early 90s. People were opening these craft breweries that were in it for the wrong reasons, didn't understand how to brew to scale, and really it was detrimental not only to their brands, but to the craft movement as well. And so we finally moved through that successfully because I'll tell you, a lot of folks getting into business now, they know what they're doing. They brew some amazing beers. But again, when it's not a gravy train with biscuit wheels here, and craft is not enjoying double-digit growth year over year, that's when people will potentially begin to cut corners. And so that's something that Kim Jordan, our founder and CEO, has really been a champion of, is quality assurance, investing in quality, invest with us. And distributors get it; they really do. Now sometimes they you get what you pay for with regard to line cleaning and whatnot, but the importance of draft to New Belgium is paramount, because even though there has been an uncoupling of building brands in the on-premise, you can build brands in the off-premise now, it's still a huge opportunity for us to get in front of folks. I can't believe I've gone this far and haven't said the word millennial yet, but it helps us get in front of millennials, and it helps us to create that consumer connection, because that's what it is. It's a connection with the brands that drives the relevancy, that brand affinity. And so for us, that starts with fresh beer. We ship on reefer trucks, which is ridiculously expensive. All of our packaging draft, we require distributors to store our beer cold. So literally, if it's not on a reefer truck getting to you, it's not room temperature. It's probably room temperature less than a few hours, and then if it's on display, a few days. But for us, it's line cleaning, it's line cleaning education, it's beer clean glass, but really it's also about the proper glassware, and that's a big Belgian tradition, is that one beer, one glass, and that's how it works. Each brewery has their own particular glass, and it's a wonderful cultural brand building tool that we're trying to bring here. So Slo's done a nice job with that. But for us, excuse me, I'm trying to.
Hey, Shannon, take a look at Ryan's question over here. I think that if you could take a quick look at that and respond to that probably will open a few eyes. Yeah,
Ryan, that's a good question. And really, the first generic answer is it depends on the state, because in some states the distributors are not allowed to clean their lines. Retailers are responsible for cleaning their lines. But say for all intents and purposes, this is kind of a regular market. If we find a dirty line, and for us, our line cleaning requirements are they have to be cleaned in a rotation with caustic and acid every 2 weeks, and the line cleaning personnel at the distributor, they have to either on their apps, their iPads, or they write it in on a line cleaning ticket when they're there last. And so we will audit these accounts, and if we found that and they turn in their audits as well, and if we find that they're not cleaning their draft lines within 2 weeks, step one is education. We don't want to be the QA police. What we want to do is really inform, inspire, educate, take a solution-based approach, because again, we're dealing with some line cleaners that may or may not. Typically, they're not well paid. They're not that well trained, and so really we have to understand what we're working with. And so what we'll do is we'll go in, we'll talk to the retailer, let them know, hey, this is, and depending on the retailer's response, a lot of times they're like, oh gosh, yes, but please clean it, even though it takes it depletes my keg. Please, we need clean beer. We need clean glassware, and so we'll sit down, we'll talk to the retailer. We will not have as civil a discussion with our distributor partners, because if we have some chronic issues, then that's actually a contractual violation, and we don't mention the word contract ever, pretty much, because it's once you pull out that gun, you better be prepared to shoot it. But we have some very difficult discussions with our distributors, and most of the time it has to do with not hiring enough personnel and their coverage is poor. But as far as pulling our beer, yes, we have pulled our beer, and we have pulled so many lines out of New Orleans, I can't even count. But that's our commitment to quality, because they're on an air compressor, or the lines are just filthy or absolutely disgusting, and we'll pull the brands if need be from an account, and that's of course after we exhaust every avenue with sending a tech, or we'll clean them ourselves, like I'll clean the lines if need be to take care of it. And so and then lazy publicans destroy high quality craft beer. That's true. Cheap publicans destroy craft beer, but a lot of times it's the distributors and retailers understand the need for quality. Sometimes it just takes a little more encouragement, and fortunately we're seen in the industry as industry leaders with regard to how we invest, and then how we talk about it, and how we preach the good word of quality. So because there's nothing better than a good pint of beer that's fresh, poured well. I mean, it just reinvigorates you each time when you're in the business. You're like, okay, this is what it's supposed to be about. So
good. We'll move on a little bit, but talk about touch on what you've seen about the legal issues and the rotating handles. You and I have touched on this a couple of times.
Yeah.
I've tried to explain to everybody in the class today, there's a price to pay if you want to play. I mean, in other words, if you're willing to play, you got to be willing to pay, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, that's true. And we fortunately, I'd like to say that the larger you are, the more you have at stake with regard to playing within the rules, and that's something that we're firm believers, and I know I really feel strongly that a lot of my counterparts are of the highest ethical and moral fiber with regard to how they approach the law, because once you go down that dark path, you're going to be on that dark path. And so we call it Rotation Nation, and I'm speaking to the trade channel that's not on-premise chain, because on-premise chain is it behaves a lot like off-premise chain. Once you get the mandate, you can legally do things like menu prints and support and programs and things like that. Your handle's protected. So I'm speaking primarily of these independents. And with Rotation Nation right now, I am estimating conservatively in my territory, which is New Mexico up to North Carolina down to Florida, that roughly 30% of my handles in these accounts rotate frequently. And what I mean by frequently is one keg in, one keg out. So you could have a tap on one week and it's off the next. And so what I've actually been impressed with too is distributors also understand, the larger distributors, Miller Coors, the Anheuser-Busch distributors, and even some, they understand the game, and they understand that there's a lot at stake, and so they don't want to put their licenses at risk. The ones that do concern us are some of the smaller outfits, the wine and spirit outfits, because they have different sets of regulations, and they can play little fast and little loose with how they leverage their spirit business to sell their beer business. And you can, do a lot of creative things with your spirit money that you can't do with beer money, and say, hey, look, I will spend this on the spirit side if you help us out with handles on the beer side. And then also some of the, some of the smaller craft distributors also struggle because it takes a good amount of critical mass to make a distributor profitable, and you need mass, margin, momentum on two of the three. I think is the beer business saying. You need two of the three to be profitable, and a lot of times they only have margin. They don't have mass or momentum on their craft brands, and so they'll have to resort to some other tactics to whether it's buy one get one or things of that nature to get their handles in. But again, it's a short-lived victory because once you're on that crack fix, you got to feed it. And so if you're constantly giving beers away, if you're constantly discounting, if you're building your business on sand and not rock. And so we see an ebb and flow in this on-premise world, but really what we found is honest-to-goodness brand building takes place when you have a great beer that's really relevant. You've got some great branding behind it. You've got some great air cover, meaning social, digital, search, native content to help support it. And you have a great distributor partner that understands how to prioritize and sell multiple portfolios successfully. And so for us, coming out with great brands, the liquid is important. Coming out with a great brand is even more so. And it's sad to say that because we've had some amazing beers go down in flames because the branding was not right. So, and I'm not going to admit if we have any bad beers that do well because the branding is so good, but no, we've had some amazing liquid, just no one gets it because the branding piece just wasn't there. And so for us, a big part of that is we had a packaging refresh last year that conservatively we were hoping was going to give us a 5-point bump, gave us an 8-point bump. We are looking to do a tap handle makeover next year, and that's not cheap. That's to the tune of $1.5 million to just swap out tap handles. But for us, it's important because we have found as this rotation nation gets into full swing, and you're walking in, and it's just it's a complete bombardment of handles and brands, and it's just you're drinking from a fire hose, and really you start getting that anxiety of trying to, what am I going to pick? What am I going to pick? You have about a 30-second window. Our tap handle and our point of sale will hopefully help cut through the clutter. We actually had some awareness studies that our on-premise point of sale is our number one awareness driver. So more so than we've run television, more so we've run all kinds of social, digital search, native content. Our neon and our tin tacker is our number one awareness driver. And so it's mind-blowing. And Jim Cook from Boston Beer, he is still emphatic about having table tents in every single account that he goes into because it's that on-premise point of sale drives that awareness. And so with our tap makeover, we're having a big bet that it will allow us to again break that clutter and drive that awareness. And we had some real design flaws. And what's funny is a lot of people have a lot of design flaws in their tap handles because they design things in a vacuum and they don't apply it to the real world where your handles turn sideways. Can you still read it? Well, what if your brands aren't billboarded? Does that impact the awareness understanding of the beer drinker? And so big bets with tap handles for us next year. And we just had a big brand refresh last year when we made some big investments in redoing our point of sale, but also not to depart from our heritage brand of the bike. And what we're really trying to do was not be the Fat Tire Brewery, because unfortunately a lot of people, it's the blessing and the curse. They see us as the Fat Tire Brewery. So we're trying to become New Belgium Brewing. And so we started off this branding journey as a house of brands, and now we are trying to become a branded house, which is a really long and arduous branding transition, but we're getting there.
But that's all part of the planning process and the strategy of the brewery. And before we get to this last part, the last few minutes, Courtney's got an interesting question that you touched on, Shannon. Can you give us another example or two of some of the flaws of tap handle designs? I know you and I could probably sit here and talk all night long about what we've seen over the years, but give us some thoughts. Give us some thoughts, and let's get to this planning.
Yeah.
And I want you to touch on some of your ideas on cider, too, because we had a lot of people interested in cider.
Yeah, really, Courtney, the biggest design flaws that we've seen are two. One, just sheer size of the tap handle. I mean, you can't physically fit it, with the rest of the lineup. So usually it's a large bulbous symbol sitting on the top of a tap handle that retailers like, I can't have that. So they cut the top off and create their own. I was in an account in Nashville. They put puppets on top of the ones that were too, that they didn't have. They had to alter the tap handles and put a puppet on there. But that's one. But then two, the second is a lot of times these larger tap handles, they're turned sideways, and that immediately makes you non-existent. You disappear. And so you have such an iconic tap handle that that is recognizable regardless of if it's turned sideways or not. But that's almost impossible to come about. And you'd have to catch lightning in a bottle to understand what iconic handle you can brand out there and own, and also just visibility. The color schemes, color blocking, font size. These are all classic traps of tap handle design that happen, and then functionality where they break. They don't have. They can't stand up to the wear and tear, or there's some unintended consequences where you have a great looking handle and a great looking crown piece on it, and it snaps. And then it just looks awful. And, again, you don't want to put any obstacles in front of anyone that, when in that decision-making window. So hopefully that helps. Oh, good.
The question is all about keg deposits and getting keg audits and all that.
Okay, this gray hair is off from us. This gray hair over here is keg audits. Well, and fortunately, it was a wild west until about, Geoff, what would you say, about 5 years ago, where states finally started passing laws where they would not accept stainless steel kegs in scrap yards. That if you got caught with one, you were fined. It became a crime. Because obviously you're taking a stainless steel keg, taking it to a scrap yard, and those they cost us $180. Yeah, and keg deposits are $50, typically, and so but you can get at the time you could get quite a bit more than $50 for at the scrap yard, and so for us, preventing keg loss, it's nature of the beast, and it's particularly the 6 barrels, and we have some theft from other breweries, and whether it's accident or not, but keg loss, the biggest percentage of keg loss happens in distributor warehouse, and so we will have a keg audit, and if anyone figures out an easy way for a keg audit, please let me know, because outside of putting an RFID or a GPS tracker on every single keg, there's always a shadow inventory out there that's either in transit, in trade, sitting in the back alley of some bar, and it translates into real money. And we calculate about 3% attrition a year on our keg. On our keg inventory, and by the way, outside of capacity CapEx investments, kegs are the single largest expenditure that we have when we roll into a market. It's like we don't roll into a market and we're making it rain cash. We have a lot of upfront expenses, and kegs are one of those. And interestingly enough, with contracting now, and then there are businesses out there, MicroStar, that will loan these new craft breweries kegs, and will handle that part of it. I really don't know how some folks make any money that will go to like the hub, which is the contract brewer, and like a MicroStar. They are so expensive that I literally don't think anyone is making any money. They're just doing it to get their brands out there and moving forward outside of their home market. So
yeah, you're probably breaking even on that deal.
yeah.
What's your study show, Shannon? For every account that has a New Belgium product, how many kegs does it take to service that account?
5.
Okay.
With in transit, warehouse. I mean, you got one inventory, one backup, one in transit, and then we've got to hold our float back at the breweries, right? Because there's always 1 to 2 floating somewhere, either transit there, keg return, in warehouse, at account, and then physically on tap. So
that's what we discussed. We're kind of running out of time here because I promised Dr. Coleman we'd be off right at the top of the hour. She has another class. That's okay. We had a lot of information. Does anybody here in the last minute or so have any questions that we can quick answer? Here's one from Ryan.
Ryan, okay. I'm going to get my calculator out. 3.2 million. We had 10,000 that we bought from Felt at $325 a pop.
Well, understand, y'all. New Belgium is going to do over 1 million barrels this year. So that gives you an idea of the overall volume that they do. Yeah, it is a very successful brewery.
Yeah, and
it's also employee-owned.
Job.
It's employee-owned. So why Shannon's smiling. He has a piece of it. So
very small.
Well, if there's no more questions, I want to circle back around and really thank Shannon for taking the time out of his personal life tonight and visit with y'all and give you his the opportunity to share his wisdom of all the years and the success that they've had in the beer business. So on behalf of all of us here at Portland State and the Craft Brewing School, thanks, Shannon, and we hope to have you back again someday soon.
Sure, and really, I can talk all night, which I was like, okay, please don't. But yeah, Geoff and I, we go way back, and we have a lot of fun discussing this. And in all sincerity, please, if you want to continue any discussions, I know we didn't get to ciders, and we've got a lot of interest in cider right now, and I can share with you perhaps some of the pros and cons that we're weighing. But please, you can contact me at scahalan@newbelgium.com. That's SCAHALAN@newbelgium.com. And if you want to send me a note, I'll hit you back, let you know I got it, because sometimes things get transposed. If you didn't hear back from me, that means I didn't get it. But if you want to take something offline and chat about it, I'm happy to. Because this is, I'm not fit to do anything else but sell beer.
Thanks again, guys. We got to get going. Enjoyed it, everybody. And unfortunately, this is the last live one of this semester. So we'll be in touch next week and get the assignments in so we can get all this done. Thanks again, and y'all have a good evening. And thanks, Shannon.
All right. Thanks. Take care.